Hello and welcome everybody to the H3O podcast. I am Joel Rather here with my co-host Jason Hirsch. Jason, how are you?
I'm happy to be here.
Well,
Excited for this chat.
aren't we all? Yeah. So, happy today. We have a very special guest, someone that has taught me a lot over the years, whether he knows it or not, through lots of instructional videos and things like that, his shows. He is the owner of Chappell Guide Services. He is the host of Elk Camp TV, which is now in season 3 on the Sportsman's Channel. He also has his own series of calls, the Steve Chappell Signature Series calls with Rocky Mountain. And even further back has some DVDs, Extreme Bulls being one of them that's pretty well known for those of you that have probably seen and viewed some of those. So we're extremely excited to have Steve Chappell on the show today. Steve, how are you doing today? Thanks for joining us.
I'm doing excellent. I really appreciate you guys having me on, and I'm looking forward to visiting with you guys today. All things elk hunting, right?
Of course, yeah, yeah. What
Starting
else?
to get the itch, so
I know.
this is priming the pump, if you will.
Yeah. So, Steve, for those of the people that are listening that may not know, I know you grew up in Southern Colorado, correct? And
Right.
and now live in Arizona. What's tell everybody a little bit about your history, how elk hunting became such a passion for you, and kind of your path to where you are today, which is, obviously could be a really long story, but maybe the condensed version of that.
You bet. I was really fortunate and blessed to grow up in a family where hunting was just the norm from the very beginning. So, my mom and dad raised me hunting, and I can still remember going out at an early age and hunting, birds and squirrels and rabbits with BB guns, and then graduating to a 22 and, going from there. So it started out at a very early age. My dad took me along on his mule deer hunts, which at the time I didn't really realize some of the incredible mule deer he took back in on the 70s and 80s. And now I look at the mounts and I go, wow,
Yeah.
amazing. I was first introduced to elk hunting again by my dad, who, took us as young boys up into the high country of Colorado. And we would do the classic elk hunt up there in the high country with the wall tent, and the stove, and the horses, and all of that.
Yeah.
So that kind of gave me the bug. But I would say I first really got the bug for calling there in the early 90s. When Wayne Carlton, Will Primos, Rocky Jacobson, those guys were, just getting well known for producing videos and putting elk calling on the map, so to speak. And I remember buying VHS tapes and watching that and just trying to emulate what they did. And I would say that's really how I got my feet wet in elk hunting, was watching those guys and learning from them way back then. And, my first archery bow hunt for an elk was actually successful based on just emulating what those guys did. So that really gave me the bug right there when I went up and hunted on my own, called a bull in on my own, and killed it with my bow. I was hooked for life, and I knew it was something that I had to be involved with the rest of my life. So
Yeah, and I think I know for me personally, there's something about as you learn to shoot a bow, there's almost I feel like an immediate addiction that comes with learning how to shoot, and then thinking about the processes that go into that, and then actually getting out into the field and knowing, there's so many things that have to go right, and it boils down to you, and even the proximity. I mean, my first experience as elk hunting was rifle hunting. A good friend of mine, who's part of kind of our team, Darby Flansburgh, he was the first one that kind of pulled me into elk hunting, probably in about year 2000 or so. And his dad grew up kind of at the south gate of Yellowstone, and so they hunted moose and elk and all sorts of things. And so I was fortunate enough to tag along with them, and for rifle hunting, it always seemed like you're glassing from so far away, and it didn't seem very personal. and and I have nothing against rifle hunting. I still enjoy it when I do. I don't do it as much, but when I think of now where my go-to and my preference is to bow hunt, and just September, right? Like I think September just has such a different feel to it than hunting in the snow in November and December.
Especially here in
No
Colorado,
doubt.
you get the colors, right? And last year we had amazing colors to go hunt through, so you get beautiful scenery, and being in the woods is a lot of fun. But kind of piggybacking off Joel, your point, I'm the new guy in this hunting group. Obviously, Steve, you're the veterano, and Joel's following close behind. But it's Joel's fault why I bow hunt. He got me dragged into this whole mess. Yeah, good for Joel, right? He got me dragged into this whole mess, and I echo those points because I started out rifle hunting, and just the idea of being 20, 30, 40 yards from that massive of an animal as he's bugling, or just feeling the ground shake as he's moving through the woods, that kind of feeling, that sensation is something that gets your blood pumping, gets your adrenaline going, and makes you want to come back and do it again. Yeah. Regardless of whether or not you actually took that animal, that experience alone is enough to hook somebody.
That's a great point. I would say for me, especially as time has gone on, for me, it's definitely become more about just playing that game, that calling game with those elk. And, I kind of call it a chess match you're playing with them. And again, for me, it's not so much about, killing that elk or taking him home in the bed of my truck, although that's icing on the cake if that happens. But if I go out, for me, a successful hunt is, like you say, Jason, having an interaction with an elk at, 20 yards or less, whether I could have taken him or not, just knowing he came into the calls and was duped and, I fooled him with what I was doing is just really fulfilling and amazing. That's what separates elk hunting from any other animal, in my opinion.
Yeah, for sure. So it kind of echoing and piggybacking off of that, obviously you're very well known from a calling perspective. And as I kind of mentioned in the introduction, as I got more into bow hunting, obviously the prevalence and necessity to understand that, the language of elk, right? Like I think that there is a language of elk. And so I start seeking out information, and, inevitably I run into, lots of videos and things like that. And I've, I'll admit wholeheartedly, I've watched tons and tons of your videos on YouTube and things like that, where, you've given people so much information based on just the countless hours of experience that you have in the field. Maybe let's talk through that process, and even more so, like, as someone who maybe isn't very confident in calling, I think there's definitely a huge factor in that. Folks get afraid to call because they don't feel like they're making the right sounds, or that maybe they're making the wrong type of call in situational things. Talk about the person who's maybe in that boat who's saying, like, man, I really wish I knew how to do that better. Like, what's starting points for you, like as a person who's like, I don't know anything, but this is something I want to do?
Yeah. For me, the first thing that I did when I sought about to become a good caller is just to try to become more elk-like in my sounds, not necessarily knowing exactly what sounds maybe that I was making, but I was just wanting to sound elk-like. And then after, I got that down, which I'll say this, it's a journey. I never feel like I've mastered elk calling. It's always an ongoing process. But I say the first thing as far as calling and strategy and, technically, is to not overcomplicate things. I think there's a saying that me and a friend have, too much research and not enough development. and what I mean by that is some people will make it so complicated and they worry so much about what is the bull saying, what am I saying, that it just confounds the whole thing. Really, to me, what I boil it down to these days, first off, is am I dealing with a herd bull or am I dealing with a satellite bull? That's the biggest thing for me to know when I'm out there calling to a bull. So if I'm dealing with a satellite bull, that's my dream come true, because that's an elk that wants company. He's all about getting with some cows, being a herd bull himself, or going in and stealing some cows from a herd bull. So with satellite bulls, I'm pretty much just doing what I refer to as just nice, mellow, standard, nasally cow calls. Another thing that I want to relate to your listeners is that you don't necessarily have to master a diaphragm mouth call to be a great elk caller and call a lot of elk in. You can really call a lot of elk in with an open reed call. I would say probably of all the elk I've called in, in the past 2 to 3 decades, I would say probably 80% of those have been with an open reed call. And again, because the reason is for that, those calls just by design, if you get one that's got the right design, it's going to have that 3-dimensional nasal quality to it, and the bulls just really respond to that. Then by contrast, if I'm dealing with a herd bull, I found more and more in the last several years that my calling has kind of changed and evolved as I've gone along in dealing with herd bulls, because what I find with them is that they've already got what they want. And their motto is, 10 birds in hand are better than one in the bush over there. Yeah. So what I found with them is that they are jealous protectors over what they already have, and that's those cows. And they are super jealous of those cows. So I use that to my advantage by getting super tight with them. That's the biggest thing with the herd bull is distance. You've got to get in his zone and be a threat to him before you call to him. And the sound that I found to be most effective is what I refer to, and many of your listeners have heard it referred to as a lip ball bugle. Yeah, it's kind of that raspy, vibrating your lips. That sound, I can either just do a pure lip ball, or I can do what a friend of mine kind of brought about, called it the bull calling cow's bugle. It starts out with a high tone, and then it breaks down into that lip ball sound. And I'm telling you what, if you're in a bull's zone and you've got his cows right around you, and you make that sound and you do it with the right tone, emotion, and volume, it's incredible the reaction you get out of that. They don't take their cows and go away. They come over to kick your rear and get you out of there.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I think, to me, those are the things where one of the first thing that comes to mind for me is like, when you have an opportunity, the first and foremost thing is you have to get out there, and you have to get into the field, and you have to find ways. And you'll probably admit to this as much as anybody, just based on experience. Like, you got to screw it up a whole bunch of times, and
right.
You're gonna get in those scenarios, and then you go back and you replay it, and you go, what should we have done there, right? Like what did I do?
You always play the what if game, right?
Yeah,
what if I had?
And what we all have to realize is nobody bats 1,000. I think people sometimes get the impression, that guys who are on TV or have videos or whatnot, or have YouTube instructional videos, that we bat 1,000. I by no means bat 1,000. And you're exactly right, Joel. You've got to make mistakes to learn from them. And you're always learning. I feel like I learn something every year I'm out there in the field. And, every bull you deal with is a little bit different. He's got a little bit different temperament. He's going to maybe want to hear a different sound than the other herd bull heard. So I think that's the biggest thing in my approach that's changed. I don't necessarily go to the field now with a game plan. My game plan can change based on what I'm encountering out there, and it's ever changing minute by minute. And I like to think that I'm able to adapt, and that's what makes me more effective out there, is adapting to what I'm encountering.
Right. No, I think that's a great kind of approach, and obviously what you do based on the fact that you're taking information. I think that a lot of folks, like for us, typically we look at a 7 to 10 day period. We try and identify that, and we can talk about all sorts of different things that go into, like, when do you go, when do you plan your hunt? Sometimes it's based around family, who knows what it might be, but right. Within that time frame, I think we always have a strategy, which is, and maybe you can talk about this with your clients and even your personal, hunts themselves is, if you go into a 7-day, a week-long hunt or whatever, you typically have kind of what I consider to be, a mentality, what's day one, what's a day one hunt look like compared to a day 6 hunt, right? And I know for us, it's, starting out with the best intentions and moving down that continuum to, if we're still hunting on day 6 or 7, then
it's relative calm down to extreme panic as you get closer.
Exactly.
To it's like, I got to get a bull right now versus
bottom of the 9th inning.
Right. Yeah. I'm slow playing this right now. I'm beginning going, all right, going to kind of feel this thing out. And as it wears on, you get more frustrated and you start to hit the panic button, and maybe you make stupider moves as you go because you're in that rush.
Yeah. So to that, like, what's your recommendation? I mean, especially for someone who maybe hasn't killed a lot of elk, what do you typically tell a client or someone that, is going out with trying to put together that game plan? And a lot of guys say, well, I don't want my hunt to end on day 1, but what if day 1 is the only opportunity you get, right?
Yeah, I always say take the opportunities when they're given to you. As a matter of fact, my 2019 archery hunter, we had a phenomenal opportunity on day 1 of the archery hunt in Arizona this year, or this past fall. We didn't get the bull. It was almost shocking how we went from having no bugling in the morning, couldn't get anything to answer, to all of a sudden 2 bulls answer my location bugle. We start pursuing and they shut down, didn't make another sound. And all at once I get a visual on a couple of cows. And then I see what I think are the herd bull's legs out there in the trees about 120 yards away. So we had literally walked right up into the middle of them because they weren't being vocal. And so I set my hunter up real quietly and I snuck back about 40 yards. And again, the first sound I made to that bull, it kind of flies against my instincts. My instincts are always to want to be a lover and to cow call. That's just kind of been my history as a caller. But I said to myself, no, the call to make right now at this bull, since you're right in here with his herd, is that lip ball. And sure enough, I made that lip ball, and that bull bugled right back to me and came right over and walked up to 20 yards from the hunter. So, I always tell my hunters, take the opportunities that are given to you, and you'll know when it's the right bull. Like in Arizona, I tell my hunters, if the bull doesn't blow you away, if you have to think about whether it's a trophy bull or not, don't shoot him because he's not the right bull. Yeah. And then we can reassess as the hunt goes on. As we get later in the hunt, I always tell a hunter, it's totally up to you. You don't have to reduce your standards down, but that's your personal decision. Because I tell them you're going to get opportunities, and the hunt typically gets better as it goes. I tell them once we get beyond, say, the 18th to 20th of September to the end of the month, which I see the dates for Colorado this year, I think are September 2nd through the 30th.
Yeah.
Very, very good dates. If I could have any week to 10 days that I wanted to hunt, I would say I would pick the 20th to the end of the month. On most years is where I would want to be if I was limited to that.
Yeah, I think we saw that last year where, in fact, I think the last 2 years, it really seemed like the peak of the rut was.
We didn't even get into the rut last year.
Yeah, it really.
We were there the last week of the archery season. They weren't even calling. Yeah. And the year before that, they had just started calling. And again, we were there late in the season. So, we've seen a delayed, because it's been so warm so late into the season, we've seen a delayed onset of the rut, and that's hampered our ability to, vocally find them, right? Yeah. Like, just calling. Yeah. Because, last year when we went out, they stopped calling at 5:30 in the morning. They shut up for the entire rest of the day. I'm like, well, crap. How are we supposed to find them now? You mean we gotta walk all over this mountain? Okay, I guess that's what we're doing. Yeah. But it was much more difficult to find them because they weren't herding up, they weren't bugling. It makes it a much more adventurous trip than it would be if they were actually calling.
Yeah.
Yeah, I totally agree, Jason. It makes it so hard to kill up with a bow when they're not vocal.
It's a needle in a haystack.
Totally. And I think sometimes the worst thing you can do is get desperate and just start tromping around and getting into their bedding areas when they're not vocal, and then you blow them up. They move into a different drainage, so you're starting all over again. Plus now they know they're being hunted and pursued, and, they get less vocal when they're pressured. So I call it in Arizona. It's interesting that you say they stop bugling at 5:30. We kind of have the same scenario in Arizona. I call it the famous Arizona gray light shutdown. You can be out there. You can go out there at 3:30 in the morning and be listening to them bugling during the darkness. You put no pressure on them, blow no calls at them, don't start pursuing them. And just like you said, right as first hint of gray light starts to hit, they shut down and they push away from you. And sometimes they might pipe back up after half an hour or so, maybe when they get close to their bedding area and they're trying to sort things out a little bit. But many times, many mornings, they don't talk again, and it can make an archery very difficult.
It's really frustrating.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
I mean, that's what I live for. I live to hear those bugles and be able to go find them and get close. And then when it doesn't happen, it's almost like a letdown or disappointment to my hunt.
Yeah. So in that circumstance, what's a strategy that you like to employ, like you said, where you don't want to kick them out of their beds too much. You're trying to figure out, obviously, hopefully you've done some homework and you have at least some idea, whether that's e-scouting or actually on foot and those types of things. What's a good recommendation, or what are things that you utilize in those scenarios that maybe help improve your chances when, they are pretty quiet?
Yeah. So what I do these days is I know that these elk are predominantly, 99 times out of 100, they're pushing into the wind in the morning when they're going from their feeding and watering area to their bedding area. They're pushing with their nose into the wind. So I can use that to my advantage by checking the wind with a wind checker. And then I say, being cautiously aggressive, I will move in that direction that I anticipate them to go, and just kind of flank them, so to speak. And it seems like I mentioned just a minute ago that many times when they get close to their bedding area, if there's more than one bull there, that's when they get a little bit grumpy with each other. And that bull with the cows starts telling the satellite bulls, hey, we're laying down right here, and you better, well, number one, he's telling those other bulls, you better stay away from me. And number two, he's talking to his cows to keep them right there with him. And in that instance, that gives you the opportunity, if you've done that and kind of flanked them moving into the wind, to potentially have encounters with them there as they get right there close to the bedding areas. And I've had success with that. But again, not every time. I don't bat 1,000 doing that, but that's definitely a tactic you can use, as opposed to just, going back to the truck and stopping.
And what would you say cow calling in those scenarios is maybe more of a go-to in that situation, as opposed to, wailing away on bugles?
Yeah, again, if I were to label myself, I'm definitely more of a lover than I am a fighter, for sure. So if I'm, wondering or questioning what call I'm going to do, typically I'm going to lean more toward cow calling than I am toward bugling. You're dealing with a herd bull with cows, and you're not in his zone, as I was talking about earlier. And if you're bugling at him from 300 or 400 yards away, he may bugle back to you, which is, sometimes good because you get a location on him. But if you continue to put that pressure on him with that bugle from too far away, he's just going to push away from you. Yeah. And I found many times that his cows, his lead cow, will even pull the herd and pull him away from you when you're bugling too much, because it's all about distance to deal with a herd bull.
Yeah. So kind of piggybacking off of that, I know something that we've had numerous conversations about, and I think it's such a wide array of either preference. People get kind of pushed in a lot of different directions. I know that when I think about apparel and things like that, what's your kind of stance as far as scent control. We see now like the popularity of a lot of folks using hex suits and those types of things. Like, I know I had a conversation with like Dirk Durham last year and kind of asked him about that. And I mean, he was just adamant, like, just play the wind. Doesn't matter. Play the wind. All that stuff's garbage. Like, what's your kind of stance with that? Because I feel like the apparel companies as one, it's a huge marketing piece in one regard. And, you look at guys from, years ago that killed elk in flannel shirts and stuff like that. So,
Absolutely.
So, where's your position on those types of things?
Yeah, maybe somewhere in the middle. It makes me kind of smile because I recently posted a video to YouTube and I had someone comment, I think they said something like 1995 called and they want the camo and bow back. And it just made me laugh. And someone else commented back and said, it doesn't matter. And I would agree with that. It doesn't necessarily matter whether you have the latest and greatest as far as camo and all of the equipment and everything. It's more about how you hunt, how you call, your approach to it. Although I will say, these newer clothing lines, these more technical lines of clothing, they're super comfortable to hunt in. I mean, it's like wearing a second skin. If you encounter bad weather, it's definitely, more impervious to the elements and a lot more comfortable to hunt in. So, I'll be the first to say I've worn Sitka over the years. I'm now going to be wearing Scree this coming fall. Really like those clothing lines. As far as scent control and scent, I'm very much like Dirk in that I always hunt the wind 100% of the time. I carry a wind checker with me all the time. Matter of fact, one time I can remember in my guiding career, I left my wind checker at camp. And when I realized I had left it at camp, we were going out for the afternoon hunt. I literally was looking for it in my pack in a bag, and I was driving, and like an idiot, I was distracted, and I drove the truck off the road looking for my wind checker. So that's how fanatical I am about the wind and having a wind checker with me.
Yeah.
But then I'm also, I do everything I can to control the scent on my clothing. Like, I use the scent killer or the scent away or the dead downwind, to wash my clothing in. I like to start clean, if that makes sense, and be as clean as I can. Because one thing I think it does is I think it buys you distance. I've noticed when I feel like I'm really clean, so to speak, that elk have to be closer to me in order to win me than if I've gone for 2 or 3 days and I'm a little more ripe. That's what I've really noticed, is that it can buy you distance. It may be the difference between killing an elk and not, because if he has to get in close to smell you, or let's say you call him in and he's in your shooting lane and he catches a whiff of you, and if it's a light whiff, sometimes they'll stand around a little bit and they'll kind of crinkle their nose and lay their ears back and look around like, whoa, what's that? That's not something I want to smell. Whereas if you're just ripe, they're just going to wheel and blow out of there really quickly.
Yeah.
In my situation, hunting with me, a hunter and a cameraman, obviously I have to hunt the wind 100% of the time.
Yep.
But again, I like to be as clean as possible. If nothing else, it's for me mentally. It makes me feel better.
Yeah.
How do you deal with the complexities there? Like you said, it's you and a client and a cameraman. Like, how do you deal with the complexities of the cameraman who's responsible for getting a shot, but then also you having to guide a client into an animal? Like, how do you manage all the bodies around you, putting everybody in the right spot so that you can get the great shot, but at the same time set your client up for his shot?
Yeah. So ideally, what I tell my cameraman is, you're just kind of an extension of the hunter. I want the cameraman to be set up where he's got as much of the same view that the hunter has as possible, because then he's more likely to get that animal on camera at the shot instead of missing that shot because he's in a lane where the cameraman can't see him. Obviously setting them both up in the shade is paramount when you've got two people there. I can honestly say that over the years, filming for over 20 years now, that I cannot honestly recollect one single time that a cameraman has blown a hunt for a hunter. Because elk it's all about movement with elk. If you don't move, when they're looking, they are not going to pick you. I think people a lot of times overestimate their eyesight. Their nose is what is their biggest line of defense. That's what they're all about, is scent. I'll tell my hunters that if a bull walks into your shooting lane and for whatever reason you have not been able to get back to full draw, elk just do not see things like we see. I tell them, if you can draw your bow back smooth and easy, straight back, most 9 out of 10 bulls are just going to turn and look at you, and they're going to give you that opportunity to shoot. So I tell them, don't let an opportunity pass by and not try to get back to full draw if you haven't, because again, they're just going to turn and look. And as a caller, if I'm back behind, if I do hear that bull spook and run, the first thing I'm going to do is blow a call.
Yep.
And 9 times out of 10, again, the bull's going to turn and look and give that hunter a quartering away shot.
Yep. I think
maybe even a better angle.
Yeah, I think that's the snippet of that I think is so valuable, because I do think a lot of times, if a hunter gets into range and you start to you feel that kind of tension building and your heart rate going up, and a lot of times I think guys will freeze and say, I can't move at all. Like, he pinned me and I'm screwed. There's no way I'm going to get to full draw.
Right.
And so, I think that's a great piece of information, because like you said, if you do it smoothly, if you draw straight back and you're not really herky jerky or whatever, the opportunity isn't lost, like you said. And
right.
You're never going to know that if you just stand there and go, well, I should have drawn. Right.
Yeah. I should have drawn already.
Worst case, you blow them out of there. Best case, you get your shot.
Absolutely.
So it's
springboarding off of what you just said, Joel. I literally had called in a couple of bulls. It's probably been 2 or 3 years ago, and I had a cameraman with me, and I kind of whispered to him. I wasn't going to shoot these bulls; they weren't, the caliber I wanted to shoot. But I whispered to him, and I said, "Watch this." And I cow called. I had a mouth reed in my mouth, and I cow called a couple of times, and we were in the wide open, and the bulls were in the wide open. I blew a couple of soft cow calls, and I just drew right in front of them, again, nice and smooth, and they stood there and just stared at me.
Yeah.
I mean, for a minute, I could have shot all day long.
Think about that, though, what he just said in terms of what Darby and Dusty did last year on our hunt. So on our hunt last year, first day, we split up into 2 groups, and Darby, who we had mentioned earlier, they said they were walking along this path and had a cow at about 40 yards directly in front of them, and she allowed them to pull an arrow out of the quiver, notch it in the bow, draw back, and get a frontal shot without moving. So, I mean, just thinking about what you just said there and then applying it to our hunt last year, I mean, that's 1,000,000%, because I'm sitting there going, what a dumb cow. Like, why the hell didn't she, spook? But like what you're saying is, if they're not picking up those movements at that distance, then you're a lot safer than you really think you are.
Yeah. And again, like you said, if you don't try it, you'll never know if you could have gotten away with it or not. It's a constant learning experience out there.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
That's fascinating. I love that.
So I think that it's interesting, because we've talked a little bit about, understanding maybe a little bit of a progression in calling and learning some of those things and becoming a better caller. And then we've talked a little bit about, scent control and apparel and clothing. And there's just been this progression. And the good news is I believe the industry is really strong. I think the numbers in Colorado last year were an all-time high in terms of archery tags. I heard some ridiculous numbers. I don't really know how
oversold them.
How to validate that. So, I mean, so that part of it's good. But when I think about the future, and I look into, what's still out there, what's missing? Is there anything in your mind as far as the industry goes or hunting goes that it's like we haven't identified that yet, or there's still room to grow? Like, do you see anything like that in your mind based on your experiences?
Gosh, I have to say, nothing just jumps out at me. There are so many amazing resources out there these days, and so many talented people that have so much to offer. Like you say, there's all kinds of guys out there that know elk calling, that have all all kinds of success. They have YouTube series. There's just so much you can learn these days. I believe that the calls have come along by leaps and bounds. I mean, you know, when Rocky Jacobson invented that pallet plate call back in the early 90s, that to me was the most substantial leap in elk calls up to that point.
Yeah.
And then when the open read calls came out, I don't really know if it was Carlton, Jacobson, or Primos that first came out with an open read call. Maybe somebody else that I don't know. But that was a huge advancement. And now these days, the bugle tubes or grunt tubes, you know, they kind of look like wiffle ball bats somewhat.
Yeah.
But what they do is they create a real resonance and three-dimensional quality because they create back pressure.
Yeah.
You know, so those are just phenomenal. You know, we've got high definition and 4K cameras that are affordable. It's just amazing. I don't know, 20 years from now, we're going to look back and I don't know what we'll see that is obsolete, but I'm sure it's going to continue to advance. But I just think that the hunting industry is in a real good place right now. You know, there's a lot of good advocates for it.
Yeah.
I just think it's a great time in hunting. Yeah.
Yeah. Do you think that the emergence of, you know, the digital platforms, I mean, I know like for us, obviously, you know, I don't even have TV anymore. I mean, I have, you know, internet TV, and the interesting part about that is like I go into YouTube every night. I go into even Amazon, you know, I can go into Amazon Prime and type in elk hunting, and you know, whether it's a Randy Newberg or yourself, or, you know, go into YouTube and you see, you know, like the Born and Raised guys and some of these other folks. Where do you think that has been, you know, what do you think are the ups and downs of that? I think that it's exposed so many more people based on the ability for them to reach those things. And yet at the same time, we look at it and go, well, I don't want everybody to know that we're hunting.
We've already sold enough. Yeah. We don't need anybody else out there.
Exactly. Yeah, it's making a lot. In my opinion, it shortens the learning curve because there's so many resources out there. You know, like you guys say, the Born and Raised, Elk 101, Dirk, you know, all these people. You know, guys like you with podcasts, we can learn a lot from that. You know, selfishly, I would say for me, the digital age hurt me with my DVD business, the Extreme Bull series. Yeah. Basically, I had to come to the realization that was over, and you know, it was time to move on from there. So at that point, I decided to make a move and get into TV. And being on TV somewhat limits me in what I can do digitally because, of course, airing my show on Sportsman Channel, and I can appreciate this, is that, you know, they don't want my content that's going to be airing starting here on June 29th and running through the end of the year. They don't want me bleeding that out onto YouTube or Amazon or wherever else where everybody can see it for free. So I totally get that. So, you know, there's a period of time there, a year, where I have to hold, you know, my episodes. So that hurts me somewhat, not just being able to throw everything out there on YouTube where people can see it for free. But more and more as I get more seasons, you know, done, I'll be able to put more and more content out onto YouTube because I've been pretty absent from YouTube for quite some time. I don't know if you've noticed that. And that's why, because I started filming for this Elk Camp TV show back in 2016, and all of the content has been, you know, captured for producing that show.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't think people realize how much work it requires to get the production done and the timing, like you said, which is to release it and
you're shooting a whole year ahead of time.
Yeah, you know, like we have a friend of ours, Garrett. I mean, they do from Top Priority. They do, you know, like Full Draw Film Tour every year, and so I talked to him, and he just actually got back into town, and we're gonna have him over someday, and kind of their rollout period. You know, I remember talking to him months ago, and they're helping some people actually produce, you know, some of their short films for Full Draw and stuff like that. And he's talking about, yeah, you know, we've got this one and this one and this one kind of in the tank, and we've got to wait before we release this stuff because of sponsorships and all these other things, right? And so, like you said, you know, there's definitely an upside to that and a downside to that, especially when you look at it. If you're full time, and it's something that you're trying to create a livelihood from, the monetization and the digital aspect of what's going on today, being on people's radar, like you said, it can be daunting. Like it's hard because you feel like you always have to be on everyone's radar. You have to be putting out stuff and keeping up, and it can get exhausting. Right. That's for sure.
Yeah, I kind of say be careful what you wish for. So any of your listeners out there who are dreaming of being in this hunting industry, there's a good and bad to it, I will say. And the first thing for me is I had to decide whether hunting for myself was more important to me than video and guiding people. And I decided a long time ago that I valued sharing, incredible experiences with other people who have great tags as much as I would hunting myself, especially if it meant just over-the-counter tags, hunting small elk up in the mountains. I mean, that's totally fine, and I know a lot of people love that. Because again, be careful what you wish for. With what I'm doing now, I have sacrificed in large part my own personal hunting. I have not drawn a tag in Arizona since 2010.
Oh, wow.
So it's been quite a while since, but I still absolutely love what I do. I wouldn't change a thing. Editing for me and doing this show is a lot of fun. It's a little bit of a love-hate relationship. Editing can be a little bit of a grind.
Yep.
I kind of equate it to maybe writing a term paper when you were in college. You need just a little bit of inspiration and motivation to do it well. I think I've gotten a little better over the years at being able to just sit down though and grind through it and just be committed to it. But a lot of times I'll look outside and think, I would rather be out there right now going on a hike or shooting my bow or whatnot. But when I'm up against the deadline and I'm pushing to get episodes done, you just got to sit down and be committed to it and afford yourself little breaks here and there.
Yeah.
But it's all great. And again, I wouldn't change anything.
Sounds like you need to hire an editor or somebody so you can go out and shoot and hike and let him worry about editing and cutting and producing your show.
Yeah, no doubt, Jason. It's kind of bad because I'm kind of a perfectionist in that way. My first season of Elk Camp, I did have Steve West and his team produce my show, and they did the editing, and I will say they did a phenomenal job. I was very happy with it. But again, it's very nice and very empowering to be able to, edit yourself and control exactly how it's portrayed and what goes on there. So I do
1,000,000%, dude. That's my business outside of the hunting side of things. I'm exactly the same way. Mm-hmm. I'm a control freak.
Yeah.
It's my product. I'm going to put it out whether I like it or not.
Yeah.
Yeah. Good or bad, right? It can be good or bad for us.
Live and die with it.
Yeah. So,
yeah.
So kind of continuing on a vein that you touched on a little bit, which is, the guiding and the experience. Our conversation as of really recent here was, I watched one of the recent episodes of Elk Camp, and, at the end of every episode, you guys, you put out there about your program, which I believe is relatively new, which is your zero hunt fees. And I saw that, and, I don't know if you get all the credit for that, and if you do, that's awesome, but I'm going to give huge kudos to it, because my first initial thought, and I want to kind of let people know more about it, is that this is something unlike anything I've ever seen in terms of creating an opportunity for people to get an experience that obviously includes, a guided hunt and understanding the tag process and whatever. So I'd love for you to kind of just talk about, like, conceptually, how did that kind of come to light, and tell people more about it, because for me, as I've told you kind of in our interactions, I'm on board, and this is something that I definitely want to do, because I think that the opportunity is great, and the program itself, from its kind of origination and setup is just awesome.
Yeah, thank you, Joel. I appreciate you saying all that. I just found that more and more, besides guiding being really competitive in Arizona,
right?
There's just so many outfitters, and lots of good ones, I will say, that more and more I was seeing that it's just very difficult for most people to come up with, $6,000 or $7,000 to pay for a guided hunt. That's just out of the financial reach for most people. So, with that, came the thought, well, how could we make it possible for more people to be able to afford to come on a hunt like this and not make it so exclusive just to the more wealthy. And so, yeah, because of that, this concept was developed where, like you were saying, it's called zero hunt fees. Basically, the long and short of it is if someone wants to join, they pay $349 a year. That covers their yearly hunt consultation and application consultation, where I help them choose units that suit them specifically for their goals and desires on the hunt. So I help them get applied and all of that. And the best part about the membership is if they draw a tag in Arizona, their guided hunt is covered by their membership. So matter of fact, I guided a muzzleloader hunt this past year in Unit 9. A guy named Mark Ulrich drew Unit 9 muzzleloader. It was his very first year in the program. And he drew the muzzleloader tag and guided him on the hunt, filmed his episode for season 3 of Elk Camp. So that was a very inexpensive elk hunt for him.
No,
I remember him even
guided trip. I'm in. Sign me up.
I remember him even saying when we were with his bull at the end of the hunt on camera, he said, "I saved enough money that I was able to buy this new CVA muzzleloader."
Yeah,
because he had saved so much money.
That's what it's all about.
There's really, people think that there's a catch to it, and there's really not. If there is a catch, it's that Arizona is on a draw, and you have to draw a tag in order to hunt with us and to utilize that that $349 membership on a hunt. But I do say that half of the non-resident tags in Arizona are random. Half of them are issued based on bonus points, and a full 50% of them are random. So you've always got a chance in the Arizona draw is what makes it awesome. It's truly a hybrid draw system. Another great thing about it is that the draw legitimately considers both your first and your second choice. So when you understand that, what that allows you to do as an applicant, and I help my members with this to understand this, is you swing for the fence with your first choice and go for that really phenomenal hunt, and then you back it up with a second choice that still meets your baseline expectations as far as trophy quality and hunt quality goes, but that has better draw odds than your first choice. And that's the wise way to apply in Arizona, and I help my members with that. We've had guys, again, first year in the program, first time applying in Arizona, zero bonus points, who've drawn some phenomenal tags and gotten great bulls with us on their zero hunt fees membership.
How many of those guided trips do you do per season? Is it you just grabbing one guy, or are you grabbing multiple guys?
Yeah, so for me personally, I can only guide in Arizona, say 3 elk hunters in a year. That's what I can do. But I have right out about a dozen guides who help me yearly. We guide most years anywhere from 10 to 12 archery hunters. Last year we were 11 for 12 with our archery hunters. 6 of those guys were zero hunt fees members, by the way, and they were 6 for 6 on their hunt, so they were 100%. Then we guide, maybe 2 to 3 early firearms hunters, be it muzzleloader or rifle, and then we guide about, again, 8 to 12 late rifle hunters total. So we're not guiding a ton of people, but each person's getting a real quality, personalized one-on-one hunt is how we do it. Yeah,
that's pretty cool.
So definitely quality over quantity.
Yeah, I would say so. I think a lot of the units that we're hunting in Colorado sit around 8, 9, 10%. So it's a little bit higher based on that. But kind of just following up with that, obviously you had a ton of experience in Colorado. Obviously living in Arizona, guiding in Arizona now, what are the things that you see as differences in styles of hunt, and even I notice a lot of, like you said earlier, being flat ground and whatever, terrain wise, like what are ups and downs or things that you've kind of over the years grown to like about one or the other or both?
Yeah, I would say first off that I tell a lot of people who are used to hunting the more mountainous states like, Idaho, Colorado, maybe Wyoming, Montana, is that they have to understand that Arizona is more of a country club elk hunt, if you will. And I say that's not in a bad sort of way. Most of our units, like you said, Joel, are flatter to more moderate terrain, especially during the rut. Now, I will say that on the late rifle hunts, these elk will migrate and they'll get in some nasty places during that time of the year. So it can be a physical, very challenging hunt during late rifle. But on the archery hunt, by and large, you're hunting them in more easy to moderate terrain. But with that comes the fact that these elk are still a very physical animal. And, now that they're in easier terrain, they can move easily 3 to 4 miles from where they feed and water to where they bed, and they can do it in a hurry. Yeah. So if a guy's not in good hiking shape, they can still leave you in the dust, even in that easy terrain. But I would say Arizona, for me, it was just a dream come true to be an outfitter here, to get to hunt these great units every year. I just can't think of anything that I would rather do with my life. It's an incredible thing.
You could do a lot worse things.
Yeah, you certainly could be. Touch real quick. You just mentioned that about being in shape for the terrain there in Arizona. Really, I guess any elk hunt, you got to be in shape. Do you find that that's one of the biggest hurdles or obstacles that you face when you guide people that either coming to your state or guide or hunt, in other areas?
I would say by and large that the hunters that we get are usually prepared for the hunt, and they usually do fine. Matter of fact, my muzzleloader hunter last year, that Zero Hunt Fees member, Mark, he had some real back problems, but he was a tough dude. And I mean, he stayed with me step for step. I can never recollect actually having to wait on him, even when we were hunting some more physical terrain. But I would say, to prepare for an Arizona hunt, you definitely want to be in that good hiking. I call it getting your mountain legs on you, because I think there's a difference between just taking walks and power walking or jogging versus having your mountain legs. And by that, I mean hiking on uneven terrain, where you're every step, it's changing your balance and things like that. So, it's a good idea for guys to, hike in that kind of terrain as much as they can as well to prepare for the hunt. If you've got a late rifle hunt, again, that by and large is going to be a more physical hunt. And for whatever reason, it seems like we get older gentlemen who draw those late rifle hunts, and occasionally that can be a challenge because, Father Time is undefeated. That's just a reality. That's right. And it's going to get all of us. And I will say, I can't do what I could do at 30. I like to think that I hunt wiser and smarter now. But I realize that, when I get to be 70, 75, I'll probably still have the desire and drive to hunt, but I won't be able to hike and get to places, like I can now. But I always tell people the more prepared you can be physically, the more successful and the more enjoyable the hunt's going to be for you.
Right.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think, and that's a lot of our stance, and what we're trying to do is bring to light what I believe is something that is some open space in this industry, which is providing people. My background is 20 years in sports performance and strength and conditioning, with a lifelong of being in the woods. But I kind of recognize that both of those things have a little bit of an intersection, and we know that if we can provide people with better ammunition, that the conditioning and the fitness and, like you said, the uneven terrain and all these other things, putting, as the work starts when the animal's on the ground. Well, if you're in the high country, that's a big physical endeavor. And so our mission has been to try and create an opportunity for people to come in contact with us, provide them with better resources, so that when they get an opportunity, on one of your hunts or their own hunts or whatever, that experience can be enhanced. And we've talked to a lot of guides, and we get that a lot from them. They'll tell us all, like, we encourage people, you need to be in shape, you need to have a level of fitness. And we've even had guys say the size and the amount of trophy that someone harvests sometimes is dependent upon their fitness level. How much can they endure in a week's time. And so We always kind of like to touch on that because obviously it kind of speaks near and dear to us. And then, learning at the same time and getting, insight from you and folks like yourself that, just have such a wealth of knowledge and background. And as we kind of wrap up, I got one fun question for you, but as we kind of wind down here.
Yeah.
Who's a better elk caller, you or Corey?
Well, I will say I have been personally around Corey, and it's a totally different thing when you're around someone and you hear them call, when they're right beside you versus on video or on YouTube or whatnot. Corey is incredible. I would say, I don't know if he's won the world calling contest 11 or 12 times.
Something like
that speaks volumes. I don't get in that contest, but that's not to say that I could beat Corey. I highly doubt that I could. He's an incredible caller. I can remember probably more than 10 years ago going to one of the world calling competitions at the RMAF national event and just going, wow, that dude can chuckle. And I kind of said that's where I got the drive to learn to bugle better and to learn to chuckle better by listening to guys like Corey and Dirk and guys like that. And I feel like my bugling especially has really come along in the last few years. And again, it's by being inspired and listening to guys like that.
Yeah. I think one thing you touched on early in the episode here, you talked about bugling or calling with emotion. And I think that really stuck with me because I think people they can blow across a reed and make a sound. They can, wail into a tube, but there is another level there when you input emotion into it to create the, sequence things and create the right tones that you actually speak to an animal versus I'm just going to blow through based off, I'm supposed to start low, then go high, then go low again. And then I'm supposed to, vary the cadence. So, I think that speaks a lot to, what's something that I try and do, and Joel, you try and do it too as well. But is you're trying to speak a language, and when you speak language, you can't just be a monotone robot. You got to have some emotion.
Absolutely, that is so good, Jason. That is so spot on. Because I like to say when you make a call, especially a bugle, that you're making a statement. You're not asking a question. If you're asking a question, you're not blowing that call properly, especially when you're bugling. You want to walk up and punch that herd bull right in the nose and make him deal with you and insult him and flirt with his cows at the same time is what you're saying through that call.
Right.
And let me tell you, he's not a herd bull who is jealous and dominant, which that's what herd bulls are all about. He's going to come over and look to get you out of there when you make a call like that and make a statement with it.
Yeah. And that's what, the guys that are the best in the world, and Corey and Dirk and, all the other, champions that you've had, that's what they try and do is they try and give you that emotion. They want you to make you feel like on the other side of that curtain, there's an actual animal sitting right there.
Right. Yeah. And I think that's the interesting part too. And I also, I've heard Corey talk about this, which is, there's definitely a difference between calling in a contest and being out in the field, right? And so I think sometimes people, have to understand that there is a difference between those two, although the sounds may be similar and they're trying to exude the same type of sounds and things like that. It's not the same as taking information that you're getting while you're out there and then choosing the appropriate things to do at the right time. And obviously, the things that Corey's done with Elk 101 and the amount of information that he provides in his program. And I know that you're pretty close with him as well. And the stuff that you've done as well, just speaks volumes for what I think Jason and I have always felt by kind of crawling our way into this space is just the welcomeness and the wealth of amount that folks like yourself are willing to help people understand more and put it out there with kind of the notion that you're not going to get, no one's sending you checks in the mail for all these, videos and things that you give out freely. And to us, that's refreshing, because in our other business, within training and stuff like that, it's a lot different, a lot different than that. So
more competitive and secretive.
Oh, for sure. It's cutthroat too.
No one wants to share anything, outside of hunting, hunting locations, that's the only part where I think hunters go, oh yeah, we were over in this area kind of, and no one wants to give away that. But in terms of other things, I think it's very commendable and inviting that in this space, folks like yourself are so welcoming and so willing to give that information. And I think, just even in our short, dialogue that you and I've had, this is awesome to get you here. And to me, I'm going to have to go back and watch this to re-listen to it, and just kind of digest all the things that you've shared. So I greatly appreciate that.
Yeah.
Oh, I appreciate you saying that, Joel. And I kind of feel like I'm just being a good steward and passing it along, just like it was passed along to me by my dad. And then, like I said, by guys like Rocky Jacobson and Will Primos and Wayne Carlton, guys like that, who I looked up to when I was younger. And I really appreciate everything they did to help me and make my learning curve shorter. And that's, what I'm all about. And hopefully, something that I say can help other people have a shorter learning curve and be successful on their next elk hunt, because that would be very fulfilling for me.
Yeah, most definitely. And based on the success rates within hunting, a lot of people that have such a desire to do this, and yet, the success rate is so low. And so for folks that are just trying to, fill their first tag, they're trying to, find those opportunities. And when you have a week of your year, and that maybe is all you get, to have all this stuff that's available to them and the things that you guys do is really, really awesome. And hopefully folks will find this useful. We do want to make sure that everyone understands or knows where to find you. I know you're on Instagram and Facebook and YouTube pages and stuff like that. They can find you, Elk Camp TV. I know you have your own personal pages as well. And, we encourage folks to come out and find everything that you make available to them. And we really appreciate your time today.
Yeah, it's been awesome, you guys. I really appreciate you having me on, and I'm sure there's a lot that I didn't cover, but again, it was a great time to be on here with you guys, and really looking forward to September and getting through what we're going through right now, situation with COVID. I just want to be an encouragement to people in that regard to get through.
Thanks so much for tuning in today. We hope you enjoyed today's episode. Please leave your questions and comments below. We also encourage you to subscribe to our channel and hope that you'll tune in to future episodes. Until next time, may your aim be true and your tags be filled. Thanks again.